welcome to Easy Like a Sunday Story, episode 13. This week's story is called Last Card. I hope you enjoy it. Shh, shh, Howard said and splayed his big hands out on the table as if anything not held down would leap off and make a noise. Everyone stopped, still, and hardly breathed to avoid making a sound. No mean feat for Bob, who had COPD, which meant his respiration was exacerbated by any stress or excitement. I think we're in the clear, said Joni with relief. That was close. You boys have got to keep the effing noise down. You try keeping the noise down when your last card is the Queen of Clubs and you get pipped at the post by Black Beauty Bob, said Clive in a shouty whisper. They'd nicknamed Bob Black Beauty because he was a dark horse. He'd said he wasn't very keen on cards and had been cajoled into the group. He'd said he'd never really played before and didn't care much for it, and yet it seemed he was a dab hand and actually very good. Oh well, you win some, you lose some, said Bob with a playful chuckle. His breathing had now calmed. Not much winning going on at all at the moment, Clive remarked, still shouting his whisper. We've been 3 weeks on this, King. They had indeed. The group, who had nicknamed themselves Guys and Doll, had started by playing 10-card brag in the day room at Boxgrove Care Home. Cards was a regular distraction from rubbish television and different people came and went, but it soon became clear that the four of them were getting pretty into it and developing a bond over the game. After a while, others didn't want to play with them, feeling on the outside of the sport that their rivalry and competition had created, so they left them to it. One day, Clive suggested they make things a little more interesting and play for money. This changed the dynamic in more ways than one because gambling wasn't allowed at Boxgrove. So this new element would make the group an underground organisation. There would be risk, danger, breaking the rules. They all loved the idea. They still played practice games during the day to the backdrop of Judge Rinder, but the real sport took place in secret, 2 evenings per week in Howard's room because his was the biggest and he had the best table. They all had nicknames. Clive was the Cincinnati Kid, due to him being the youngest at 78 years old, and his cockiness. He thought he was the best player. But Joni also thought that he reminded her of Steve McQueen with his fair hair and bright blue eyes. Joni was referred to as the boss. They'd put her in charge as she was able to make sensible and fair decisions and be the voice of reason without her ego or excitement getting in the way. Plus, she had a potty mouth and wasn't afraid to give them a good telling off if they needed it. Howard was the banker because he kept account of the money. He'd been an accountant in his BCH life before care home and was trustworthy as they came. Plus, it was convenient that he was also the host, which meant that he wasn't carrying bags of jangling coins up and down the corridors at night. And of course, we already know Black Beauty Bob. 10-card brag had been great, but they'd progressed onto Newmarket, also known as Kings. Each round, you deal out all the cards plus a dummy hand, and cards are laid in order to number and suit. Each round, you put your money on a king of your choice and into the centre kitty. The centre kitty is won each time by the first person to lay all their cards, but the kitty on the king is only reached if you lay the queen of that suit. The first 3 kings usually get won and taken out of play pretty early, but the final king jackpot rolls over until it is won. The purpose of the dummy hand is to stop the jack being laid that would lead to the all-important queen. So, if the game is played well, the money on the final king can mount up to a small fortune. The current King of Clubs had been piling up the coins for several games over 6 previous nights and was a nice amount. We're not talking big money here, but coupled with the glory of laying the winning card on the back of a 3-week build-up, victory would be sweet and the celebration would be hard to keep quiet. As the anticipation grew, each session became more exciting, more intense. The time limit they'd set was getting pushed back a little at each meeting, and they were nearing midnight on the 7th session. They were all getting tired, and it was showing. Literally every round, nobody could remember who'd dealt, including the person who'd just dealt and whoever's turn it was next. I've got early onset dementia. What's your effing excuse? Said Joni, making light of her condition and mocking the others. They all giggled. They enjoyed the banter, especially from Joni. We've got a collective age of 324 and it's nearly tomorrow morning. What do you expect? We need to call it a night, boss. Make the call, said Howard. How come you can work that out, but you haven't got a clue that it's your deal, Clive said, giving Howard a gentle ruffle of his wispy white hair. We can't stop now anyway, it's too lucky. It's too crucial. Lucky 7th session. It has to be won tonight. I can feel it in my bones. Well, your bones are younger than ours, kid, and I'm not going to be able to get out of this chair if I sit in it much longer, Bob chipped in. It's the boss's call. OK. Last game for tonight. We'll carry it over to Thursday if we have to. 8's a lucky number too, kid, Joni said, giving Clive a cheeky wink. They deduced that it was Bob's deal and continued. They each put 20p on the king of clubs and again in the pot in the middle. It was tradition to announce it as you did it. I'm on and I'm in. The pace of the last few games had slowed with fatigue, but this being the last one of the evening had brought a sense of urgency to the team. The cards moved quickly and the announcements of what was being laid flowed seamlessly. It was exciting when it was like this and the atmosphere in the room was electric. Clive went first with his lowest card, Ace of Clubs, and the others spoke as they laid theirs to follow suit. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7... A pause. Anyone got the 8? Must be in the pack. Lowest red. Howard laid. 2 and 3 of diamonds. 4, 5. Nobody got the 6? Lowest black. Joni said. 4 of spades. 5 and 6. 7 and 8. 9, 10, jack. Queen's gone. Lowest red. 6, 7, 8 and 9 of diamonds, Joni said. A pause. Anyone got the 10? Nope. Lowest black, boss? No black. As she had no black, it moved on to the next player to lay their lowest black, which was Bob. Queen of clubs and out. There was a stunned silence in the room, followed by the scraping of the money towards Bob's lap. He'd won the pot in the middle, plus the mountain of coins on the king of clubs. Clive stood up in objection. He didn't say last cards. That's breaking the rules. I know you're a dark horse, Bob, but you have to announce when it's your last card in play. Shh, keep your effing voice down, kid. You'll get us rumbled and then it'll be all our last cards, said Joni. Oh, bloody hell, I forgot. It's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm 84 years old. I can't even remember where my teeth are at this time of night. You can't blame me for forgetting to say last bloody card. What difference does it make? You're just jealous because I won and you think you're the best player, kid. By this point, it also stood up to face Clive and he was getting breathless. It's the rules. It's important, exclaimed Clive. It's a game, kid. You've been taking it way too seriously. You need to calm down. Sit the F down and shut up, the pair of you. I can hear someone coming. There was a tap on the door. Howard? Can you turn your TV down and get some rest, please? Said the voice outside the door. Will do. Night, Howard replied. Right. Enough of your bollocks, you two. It's late. Black Beauty forgot to say last card. It won't happen again. But he otherwise won fair and square, so I'm ruling this the end of the game so we can all get some effing sleep and move on with our lives. If you don't behave yourselves, you're going to spoil it for all of us. It's a bit of fun, all right? It's a card game, not a boxing match, so get off your high horses, both of you. Kiss and make up and we'll start afresh on Thursday if the banker's still happy to host. Now, give it 5 minutes and then I suggest we sneak out and leave the poor man in peace. Joni had spoken and everyone knew not to argue. Bob left first and Joni watched him down the corridor to make sure he got into his room all right. She and Clive left together and he walked her back to her room. Come in for a sec, she whispered, and his eyes lit up. Don't go getting any ideas. She laughed as she silently closed the door. I just wanted to ask if you're all right, Clive. You've not been yourself lately. Oh, don't you worry about me, my darling. I am tip-top and tapping. Never been better. He flexed his arms and did a shimmy to indicate his vitality. You can't kid a kidder, kid, she said. Bob was right. Clive had been getting really serious about the cards and he seemed sort of edgy and uptight. She couldn't put a finger on it, but he seemed different and she was worried about him. I've got my watchful eye on you, young man, she said with a tender smile, and if you won't tell me what's wrong, I shall just have to work it out for myself. Well, I'm honoured and privileged. A beautiful woman giving me attention, yes please, and I couldn't think of a lovelier set of peepers to have watching over me. Yes, he certainly had a lot of the Steve McQueens about him, did Clive. It's only because I care, Clive, Joni said softly. She dropped her boss lady image when it was just the two of them, to a certain extent. Thank you, but there's really no need. He gave her a kiss on the cheek and snuck back to his room. The next morning at Elevenses, the group sat drinking coffee and debriefing from the night before. It would usually have been tea, but they were all in need of the extra caffeine today. Clive apologised for his reaction and said that Bob won it fair and square. They all agreed that it'd been very exciting and it was the most fun they'd had in years. I think we need to take it to the next level, Clive announced. How many bleeding levels are there, kid? Howard asked. You wanted us to play for money and in secret, and we are. What do you mean the next level? Higher stakes. Clive rubbed his thumb and two fingers together to illustrate his point. More wonga. Joni pushed his hand down on the table in case any of the adults were watching. That's what they like to call the staff at Box Grove. And just exactly how much more wonga are we talking about, kid? Joni asked, in the manner of Don Corleone in The Godfather. Clive leant into the centre of the table. A tenner on and a tenner in. Howard choked on his coffee and some came out of his nose. Bob whacked him on the back to make sure it was all out of his system. He's gone mad, said Bob, still patting Howard. The game could go on for weeks. We're talking big money here. Just think about it. I don't know about you, but there aren't many places I'm getting my kicks these days. That game was exhilarating. I looked forward to it every day. On the days we had a session, I felt excited and happy and I had a spring in my step all day. It's kept my brain alive, kept my mind ticking over. Imagine if there was more riding on it. It made me feel young. I felt like that too, boys, but I think my excitement and joy has come from spending my evenings with you lot. And don't let that go to you effing heads, said Joni. I never knew you cared, boss, said Bob with a smile as his neck grew longer and his head gave a wobble of pride. I'm just saying, your company and our nights out have been a boon for me. I don't need to risk my last pennies to feel young again. Don't get me wrong. It's about that for me too, Joni. Clive was looking tenderly into her eyes as he said it. I've loved spending these evenings with you. And these ugly mugs. I'm just after taking a risk, throwing caution to the wind, feeling alive. It might be the last chance we get. They each looked into their coffees and at each other while they contemplated the suggestion. Clive let them sit with their thoughts for a bit and then spoke again. Banker, you were an accountant. That means good job and good with money in my book, so you must be sitting on a packet and a half. Black Beauty, the darkest horse I know. Wouldn't surprise me if you're a secret millionaire. And boss, you don't get expensive taste like yours on the poverty line. What are you all saving it for? Your families will get enough. Your care will be paid for. The Donkey Sanctuary will get your donation when you pop your clogs. I just think you should be allowed to squander a few £100 worth of irresponsible notes on a geriatric card game. They were all thinking the same, but somebody had to say it first. Boss, Howard offered. F it. I'm in, Joni said. Can't take it with us, can we? Said Howard, words he wouldn't have dreamed of uttering as an accountant. I'm in. YOLO, said Bob. What? Said everyone. Never mind. I'm in. Great. It will take us a bit of time to access the cash, I imagine. So practice plays until next Thursday. We should all be ready for the big one by then. Clive downed his coffee in victory and left the table. The next week was a flurry of secret excitement. It was like planning for a big night out like they did in their youth. They were choosing outfits and obtaining posh nibbles and cleaning Howard's room so that everything felt special. Joni had managed to organise a bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape. She'd told her daughter it was a gift to one of the staff, and Clive had managed to snuggle in a fine bottle of scotch. He didn't reveal his source. Thursday came and they were dressed to the nines and ready for their illicit evening of fun. There was such a thrill carrying the cash to Howard's room and laying it down on the table. It held a responsibility that they hadn't had for a long time living in a home. They didn't have any responsibilities anymore, really. They didn't carry cash, keys, or the weight of decision-making. They'd regressed into being children again in that way and had lost their power. Holding this cash and breaking the rules gave it back to them, and they felt rebellious and brave and young again. And it felt good. They laughed and joked. They even felt a little tipsy and had to keep nudging each other to keep the noise down, reminding themselves that there were still some rules they had to obey. But it didn't stop them having a brilliant time. They were strict on the curfew this time, and when they stopped play at midnight sharp, the pot on the remaining king, the King of Hearts, totted up at £220. Not a bad evening's work, Howard said as he counted the kitty and safely put it away for the next game. Let's double it, Clive blurted out, his eyes wild with mischief. How much have you had? Asked Bob, indicating the bottle of scotch. He'd been joking, but there was a fair amount consumed, actually. I'm sober and I'm serious, said Clive. OK, I'm not totally sober, but I am serious. Tonight was bleeding brilliant because the stakes were high, but that will have worn off by Saturday. We need to keep raising them if we want another night like this. We should double the amount we put in each time we play. Think about it. We'll talk tomorrow. Clive walked Joni back to her room again. You look absolutely stunning this evening, Joan. I couldn't take my eyes off you all night. Could hardly concentrate on my cards. Oh, stop it, you soppy old sod. That's the Scotch talking. It's not, Joni. You mean a lot to me, you know. And I'm glad I get to live out my days in here with you. Oh, don't be so effing maudlin, Clive. You got years in you yet. None of this end of days talk, all right? But I'm glad I met you too. Even if you are a crazy bastard. She gave him a kiss on the cheek and opened the door to her room. There was a tear rolling down her cheek as she closed it behind her. She'd shushed Clive when he talked about them living out their days here, but he was right. She didn't like to think about the future. She struggled with her memory and her condition was worsening, albeit slowly. But she knew the time would come when this reality wasn't hers anymore. And the truth was, she was having such a good time. She didn't want to miss out on it. Elevenses confirmed that the stakes would now be doubled each time they played until each stake reached £200, £100 per pot, on and in. By the 8th session, the pot on the King of Hearts was at £6,000. It was surreal how they'd got to this. Probably the biggest underground card game in the area was taking place in Howard the accountant's room at the Boxgrove care home. It was almost 5 weeks since they'd first decided to become secret players, and they'd been having the time of their lives. It had given them all such a zest for life and a get up and go. They'd started to carry themselves differently and take more pride in their health and appearances. They had more energy and so exercised more, and Bob had even noticed an improvement in his breathing. Clive and Joni had spent a lot more time together outside the cards nights, and they'd grown very fond of each other. She'd noticed he'd got a taste for the scotch and had started to drink a little every day, and was sinking a fair bit more on card nights too. She didn't mention it though, it was none of her business really. They were 5 games in and everyone had won a kitty each, which was comforting that they'd all gained £500 back so far this evening. They'd been spending a lot of money and the hardest thing was getting hold of it. They'd all had to come up with elaborate stories to their families to access more cash. They'd enjoyed the mischief of spinning the yarns, but it hadn't been easy. Clive hadn't had that worry. He didn't really have any family to speak of. They all wondered who it was on the staff that he was going through and how he was getting his money without raised eyebrows, but He didn't say. Joni suspected it was the same person who was getting him all the scotch. Still, nobody had a clue whose deal it was at any point, but it was now becoming a running joke, and they tried different ways to jog their memories. A mark on Bob's arm told them that it was his turn. Clive went first, and the pace of the game was at its best, and they ran through the cards laid. Diamonds, 2, 3, 4, lowest black, spades, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, lowest red, hearts, ace, 2, 3, no 4, lowest black, and so on. Bob was on his last card and had remembered to say it. Last card, lowest red, no red. Clive laid down 4 cards, one by one. The flick of each one made a tapping noise. 9, 10, jack, and queen of hearts. It was unbelievable. It was rare enough for 4 cards with a queen to follow suit like that, but for the big queen, with £8,500 sitting on it, it was staggering. They all sat in silent contemplation for a moment. It wasn't jealousy of not winning. It was disappointment that the game had stopped. Clive felt all their hands on him as they congratulated him as silently as they could. His celebration was a delayed reaction, but he of course had a moment of elation as the adrenaline kicked in. The prize they'd all been chasing for weeks, that they'd been so close to and watched building, was his. He'd won it fair and square with a brilliant hand, and they were pleased for him. But already they were mourning the loss of the game. Clive jumped up. "I want to scream from the rooftops," he said, and he threw the cash into the air. "Come on, where are we going? I'm booking a limo and we can drink champagne and stick our heads out the roof and sing at the top of our voices and paint the town." "All right, Clive. Mind your effing noise. You'll have them knocking Howard's door down in a minute," said Joni, reluctantly. She didn't want to quash his moment, but equally she didn't want them to get caught. "I can't effing help it, Joan. I love you, you know, and I want to shout that from the rooftops and all. I've been quiet for too long and now I've won all this money and I'm still stuck. I'm still not free." He bent down to pick up more money to throw, but instead he yelped out in pain and he couldn't get up. "You stop playing silly buggers now, Cincinnati kid," said Bob, but Clive didn't move. "Shit, I think he's serious. Howard, press your panic button." "You had us pretty worried there, you old git," said Joni, relieved as Clive opened his eyes. "Joni." He looked surprised to see her by his bedside. "I told them we were together, so they let me come with you. I hope that's all right," she asked with a wry smile. "That's more than all right, my love. Thank you. There isn't another face I'd rather see." "How you feeling?" Joan asked. She brushed his brow and held his hand. "Effing terrible," he laughed. "Joni, I'm so sorry." He looked uncomfortable and started to struggle to lean forward, but Joni put her fingers to his lips and gently hushed his panic. It's okay. You got nothing to be sorry for. You've done nothing wrong." "How long have you known?" "They told me 3 months ago I had 3 months to live. So I'm officially on borrowed time. I hadn't meant us to get so close, but these past couple of months with you have been some of the happiest of my life. I couldn't help it. And the game..." His voice trailed off as he swallowed his emotion and tried to find the words. "The game has given us all something to live for, Clive. You gave that to us." "It was bloody great, wasn't it?" he said, the cheeky glint back in his eye. "It really was." She was smiling too. "I admit I thought you'd effing lost the plot at first, mind. Turns out we were all mad enough to go along with it." "What happened to the money?" he asked. Howard managed to gather it all up and hide it before the adults arrived. It's in safe hands. Don't you worry. It's yours, Joni. What? No, I can't. Give a little bit to the boys, but the rest is yours. I don't need it. I want you to have it. You were my lucky charm anyway. My Queen of Hearts. See, I was on my last card, Joan. But I didn't want the game to end. I still don't. He closed his eyes and a tear rolled down his cheek. Joni caught it in her hand. Then we keep playing, kid, she said. We break the rules. We ignore the curfew. We keep going. And we only fold our cards when we're ready. Not when they tell us we should. Deal, he whispered. The end.